Good morning, everyone. This is Thursday, April 16th, and I am here with John Hanson for our morning compliance corner with John Hanson. John, how are you doing today?
Great, thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so we have a very interesting topic today, and it has to do with a rarely used statute in the Revised Code of Washington, and it's all about the 120-day notice, and there's quite a bit of confusion in that. So we thought we would talk through that today, and we want to preface it by saying we do not do property management, correct?
Yeah, thank you. That's the very first thing I'd like to address is that we do not do property management ever, and we don't do the functions of property management. We don't do evictions. We don't do these things. So the owner can do them themselves or they can hire a property manager, but we've got to be careful not to engage in property management nor its functions.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, so let's get into the law itself. And here's what it says. Basically, it's a 2019 legislative act, which is RCW 59.18.200. It is intended to require landlords of apartment buildings who are going to remodel the property for a changed use. So they're completely changing the use of the property, and they're going to sell that property. They need to give 120-day notice to tenants. Correct on that one, John?
Right.
Okay.
Yes, that was this legislation passed last year was intended to get those greedy landlords who were trying to throw everybody out into the cold from their apartment building so they could remodel it, change the use of it, and then sell it, put it on the market. And so it's a very, very limited use of this 120-day notice thing. And so I wanted to clarify that just because what's happened is that with that legislation, tenants who are trying to cling to their occupancy, hang on to their occupancy, and are fighting being evicted, are trying to pull this rare little circumstance out and use it in an ordinary day-to-day situation, which it can't be, it can't apply. That RCW gives the definition of what this is, which wouldn't apply to a normal situation at all.
So then here's where the confusion and ambiguity comes in. Lawyers who represent landlords are then advising their clients to give 120 days notice to month-to-month residents, including residential home sales, if the landlord intends to terminate the tenancy, change the use, and put the property up for sale. So to help us understand that confusion and that ambiguity.
Yeah, so even though the legislation had a specific intent, because lawyers have been advising their landlord clients to give the 120-day notice in situations when, and again, very specific, when it's a month-to-month tenancy and the use is going to change, like from rental to, and this is a reach, but it's, it's what lawyers are advising, that if they're going to change it from a rental property to an owner-occupied property, okay, that's for the seller, okay, of the property. In those situations, again, where it's a month-to-month tenancy and that use of the property is going to change as applies to the landlord slash seller. But it does not apply to the buyer of the property after the use is already planned on changing with the purchase. The buyer plans on occupying the property and plans on this change from residential to from rental to an owner-occupied residential. So the last point I wanted to make here on this, Cole, is that that after when a sale is made and the property has been occupied by a tenant,
Mhm.
that that tenant's rights and the tenant's um, lease and things like that are assumed by the buyer, are taken over by the buyer. The buyer inherits those with the purchase. Now, a buyer has no problem. The law doesn't apply to this situation for the buyer at all. So it goes back to the Landlord Tenant Act here in Washington State, which is 20 days notice. So that new owner, that buyer new owner, the day after closing can give that tenant notice to get out in 20 days.
Very, very clear now. Okay, great. So now we really understand it's the normal way that we read that law. It isn't this very, very rarely used piece of legislation for 120 days. It really is when the buyer has completed the purchase, it's a simple 20-day notice to vacate. Correct?
Right.
Okay.
So only in a situation where there's been a month-to-month tenant and the owner of the property plans on listing with you and selling the property, in those situations, you might want to talk to your to-be client about giving notice early for that tenant to get out if they are a month-to-month tenant.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thanks so much for clearing this up for us, John. And I think the most important piece that we're saying here is we do not do property management. So let's make absolutely sure, even if you think that you might be getting into some gray area, that's what John is for. John is always here for you as your designated broker to be able to answer any of your questions on these things. And he's brilliant. I'm telling you, he's a good friend and he's brilliant at it. Hey, John, thank you so much for being here today and clearing this up. We hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.